the CentreSteer podcast, a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners.
Welcome to the CentreSteer podcast, podcast number 135 for June of 2024. CentreSteer is a monthly podcast for Land Rover enthusiasts, hobbyists, and owners around the world. This month, we have more Land Rover royalty, Doug Mays. Doug Mays participated in the 1997 Camel Trophy. Doug was on the American team with Chris Van Est. Doug takes us through his Camel Trophy experience from Washington State to Mongolia. I'm John Kosich, and joining me are fellow enthusiasts and owners, Harold and Morgan. Welcome.
Thanks for having me back.
And Harold's there. Thankfully, the storm that just happened right before we recorded, the storm passed. So Harold's able
The anticipation of waiting for me to chime in was killing you, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. Dixon has an excused absence once again from the podcast. He is aboard Placid Lassie, the C-47 World War II era plane. It is on its return flight from Europe, having participated in the D-Day and 80th anniversary commemorations. So we'll give him a pass again this month.
Yeah, the re-invasion isn't over until the planes are all back home and the paperwork is done.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see what the total flight cost was in terms of fuel and oil.
I think oil is going to outpace fuel, pretty sure.
Yeah.
They go through so much oil, those radial engines.
I was looking at the specs the other day, talking to a friend, and I was like, oh, wow, yeah, it's 100 gallons per hour for the fuel and a gallon per hour for the oil. So yeah, flying all over Europe must get a little pricey.
He's been sending us photos as he's been hopping between land masses. So hopefully next month he'll give us the full update on his trip.
And as Rover people, we put a quart or two of oil in the back just in case on a trip. I'm pretty sure they're carrying a 55-gallon drum.
Or two.
Or just for their emergency replenishment.
Yeah. I suspect that in Placid Lassie, normal plane lands, a jet, modern one, there's a fueling vehicle that comes up to service it. I suspect they probably also have an oiler that comes up to add oil.
And they ask him to fill the oil and check the fuel.
So thanks to our Patreon and Buy Me a Tea subscribers for all their support. Patreon supporters receive bonus content, including 10 questions, which is our Land Rover-oriented question and answer lightning round. A listener has asked for an update on Steve Owens' Yellowstone adventure. You may recall Steve Owens is driving a Series 1 last year, and he drove it to Greek Peak for the Jubilee, 75th Jubilee. Steve is planning for the journey to take place in 2025, and part of his planning will be a 500-mile round trip in the 80-inch to a British car show later this summer. So it's still very much in the planning stages. This is all supposed to take place in 2025, and maybe even in 2026, there might be like a two-stage adventure.
Well, I think he took a trip around the Midwest that may have been partly related to either scouting that trip or doing a portion of the trail. He did that last month, I think.
And now it's time for the North American events calendar with Dixon. We were going to insert a sound of an airplane up in the air, a C-47 as it's flying, and then we could just pretend it was Dixon and you wouldn't hear him because the sound would obliterate what he was saying.
Yeah, that joke's so much funner when you explain it, John.
Yeah, exactly. Coming up in July is the Dork Rover Revival that takes place up in Vermont.
Those dorks.
And the next ANARC-supported related event is the North Star Rover Rally taking place up in Gilbert, Minnesota, put on by the Minnesota Land Rovers Club. And if you're not already registered for that, please do so. I know there's last week, and this would have been probably 2 weeks ago now by the time the podcast comes out, there were still some campsites open. So you've been thinking about going, please register. It helps them out with their planning, especially for food and other activities. It sounds like it's going to be a good time. Harold's going to be there.
Yeah, it's filling up, but there are still spaces available. Go out and do it now before the price goes up too.
That's right. There is a price differential change I believe, at the end of the month. There are different price changes for that. So that's all listed on the website. You think I would know that off by the hand since the fact that I actually updated the website, but I don't remember that.
Yeah, you think. So time is really running out by the time you hear this. So if you want to pause us right now and go do that, go for it.
And then coming up in October, late September, early October will be the Mid-Atlantic Rally taking place in Virginia, put on by Rove. And I do know, only because you can see on Rove's website, that registration will open in August for that. And I suspect that will go very quickly. This is the 30th anniversary event of MAR.
They need like a countdown page. It's 3 days, 13 hours, 6 minutes, 32 seconds or whatever.
That would give people too exact an idea of when the registration opens.
That's too modern Rover to have be precise.
That's true. They have a habit of just randomly opening the window whenever, and people still jump in and sell it out quickly.
And then later in October will be the GAR, which is the Gulf Area Rover Rally, and that's being put on by the Gulf Coast Land Rover Club. That will be in Alabama. The date is set October 24th through October 27th. Planning is beginning and underway, and we will have Charles Bell on, hopefully on the July podcast, to give us further details on the GAR. So those are your events coming up here. There are others, of course, but these are the ones that we get off of the Anarchs Club website. And now it's time for the news. Breaking spectacular news. Freelander is coming back. The Freelander name is making the jump from the old Land Rover model to a new EV brand.
And there are precisely two people in this country that are excited about this news.
JLR is adding to the house of brands. JLR has signed a letter of intent to license as a new brand called Freelander to its Chinese joint venture partner of 12 years, Chery. For those who missed it, Land Rover sold a compact four-wheel drive model called the Freelander, or LR2, depending on the market and generation, from 1997 to 2015. The Freelander didn't get the best press, but that didn't stop it from being popular, because before the Evoque, it was the least expensive way to get into something wearing the green oval. The moniker's rebirth will also apply to mainstream products, this time pure electric vehicles outside of JLR or Chery's current lineup. What's more, the Freelander range won't be limited to China, although JLR wouldn't say how long it would be before international markets could expect Freelander arrival.
Before the Evoque, it was the least expensive way to get into something bearing the green oval. And now it doesn't matter what the cost is, because it probably won't have a green oval on it. It'll just be a Freelander.
Yeah.
Or it'll just be a Range Rover, or just be a Defender or Discovery.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we need more houses of brands.
It's interesting that it will eventually probably come out of China to some other parts of the world, especially since they already swallowed the LR2 into the sort of replace it with the Evoque, I should say.
The Disco Sport,
which is a Range Rover.
Yeah, Sport took over for the LR2. And
I like, because the Disco Sport came after the Evoque and is the same platform. I always think of the Evoque as the successor.
Yeah. They're both Freelander killers, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then according to the press release, Freelander will offer a portfolio of electric vehicles for sale in China through a distinct retail network destined over time for global export. So that kind of supports that mention in the Auto Blog article.
And truthfully, it was hard knowing that Jaguar was going to be an all-electric brand. On the Land Rover side, it is very hard to pick one and be like, yeah, let's make this an all-electric brand. The Range Rover is going to be the first full electric.
Hey, here's an idea, Morgan.
Freelander makes sense.
Are you sitting down for this? Are you sitting down for this one? Here, your small niche market vehicle.
Yes.
You're sitting down. Good. Okay. You have a model that has no identity. None. Zero. It's done. People don't even remember it. They don't even know it exists. I don't know.
Or they've chosen to block it out.
Exactly. How about maybe make that the all-electric model now? Okay. All right, let's move on. By the way, for those who have been paying attention, I'm talking about the Discovery. All right. JLR chases sales of high-priced special edition models. We've been talking about this for several months now, and we finally have some concrete journalistic information. JLR said it will pursue a significant opportunity to increase sales of special edition models Costing up to 1.5 million pounds, almost $2 billion, JLR aims to sell nearly 4 times as many special edition models from its various houses, all the brand houses, however you say that, Range Rover, Defender, Discovery, and Jaguar brand lines by 2026 compared with 2023 levels, the JLR's chief commercial officer told investors.
I see an opportunity for yet another house of brands just for the special editions.
Oh, isn't that the SVAutobiography? Wouldn't that be
maybe? But it's like the automotive world going full circle, because the high-end cars back 100 years ago, you bought the chassis from the company and then you shipped it off to a coach builder to have a custom body done on it. So you'd have a Rolls-Royce such and such by Park Ward or whatever. So you can have this Range Rover Autobiography SV special by Land Rover or something like that.
By Freelander.
Or by Discovery, finally a use for the disco name.
Well, guess what? There is another special edition. This time
there is.
It's the Range Rover Sport SV Celestial Collection.
All that practicing before we started recording, and you still butchered it.
Still failed. The Celestial Collection is a limited collection of fine, exquisitely crafted curations inspired by ancient mythology and the cosmos. This exclusive collection will be offered to selected clients in 5 sophisticated and harmonious curations: Gaia, Thea, Io, Vega, and Sol. The debut collection.
I'm waiting for the Medusa edition.
So they're saying that the prices are going to be astronomical.
Oh yeah, there's no prices here. If you have to ask, it's one of those.
Yeah, if you have to ask.
Yeah, and and I know they mention here that there's 23-inch wheels and ceramic brakes and carbon fiber bonnets, but to be candid, it just looks like a color change. It's almost like, to me,
welcome to the world of special editions. You get a special color.
Guess that's
and a nameplate.
It looks a little lowered to me, but that could just be the photos.
Yeah, it's possible. Maybe you're right. So it's a Range Rover Sport, which looks a lot like the Velar.
So they could do a special Celestial Collection Freelander, since it's all electric. And that one could be the Medusa because it's electric. So if you look at it wrong, it turns into a brick.
Speaking of bricks, we have 2 recalls. 2024 Range Rover models may shift into neutral while driving. JLR is recalling 19 Range Rover models in the U.S. due to an issue with the clutch plates housed within the hybrid transmission. The company initially defined the recall as a non-compliance recall, but has since updated to a voluntary safety recall. It says the clutch plates may have been manufactured with a flatness out of tolerance to the engineering specifications. This can trigger excessive heat buildup and degrade the materials within the clutch pack. It may also cause transmissional contaminant that blocks the hydraulic system, rendering the clutch pack inoperable. Owners of infected vehicles will not be alerted to the problem. I think this means that, like, when it's happening, not the recall part. Land Rover notes that reduced oil pressure can cause a transmission to shift into neutral and trigger a loss of drive, increasing the risk of a crash. The recall impacts 2024 Range Rover and 2024 Range Rover Sport models, a total of 9 Range Rover models built between September 11th, 2023 and November 9th of 2023. And 10 Range Rover Sports between September 4th of 23 and October 27th of 2023. Dealers will be notified of the recall on June 13th. Owners will be informed on or before July 26th. And Jaguar repairers will run a diagnostic test to determine if the clutch packs are performing as expected. Transmissions which fail the test will be replaced free of charge.
I think it's less likely to cause a crash than it is to cause backups on the I-5 freeway. In stop-and-go traffic, I think is where it's going to fail.
I'm guessing the test is probably them just going out and doing like donuts in the parking lot to try to get the transmission warmed up.
Yeah, if it wasn't broken, let's just go push it until it does, and then we can get a warranty repair. And
next, Land Rover Range Rover SUVs recalled for oil filter housing that may crack. JLR North America has issued a recall for 1,995 sport utility vehicles produced for the 2024 model year from November 28th of 23 through February 26th of 24. Incorrect specification of plastic was used to manufacture the oil filter housing. The housing's material can and will eventually crack, allowing engine oil to leak onto hot components in the engine bay. Rather than replacing the housing, dealers are required to have the housing, filter, and O-rings replaced at no charge to the customers. Owner notifications will be mailed on August 9th of 2024. Running the 17-character VIN on NHTSA's website or JLR's website is the easiest way to determine if a vehicle is indeed recalled.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of making filter housings out of plastic. Just, it reminds me of the first generation Jag V8, which had a thermostat housing out of plastic. And basically everybody said that there's two types of that thermostat housing. One which is broken and one which is going to break.
Yeah, plastic is never a good solution for something that's supposed to have longevity.
Especially around heat.
High thermal exposure.
Yeah, lots of heat exposure, exactly. And especially if it's going to be a hot and cold, quick change between the hot and the cold.
Yeah, bolted to something like aluminum, which expands at a much higher rate.
All right, moving on to the Defender OCTA. It is going to debut at the Goodwood Festival of Speed that runs July 11th through the 14th, but they're going to announce the world premiere of the OCTA, Defender OCTA, on July 3rd. It's going to celebrate its dynamic debut by tackling the famous hill climb during the festival. Unlike other V8 powered JLR products, which feature a 5-liter supercharged power unit, the new Land Rover Defender OCTA packs a BMW-sourced 8-banger. The motor has twin turbos and a 4.4-liter displacement. The magic numbers have yet to be confirmed, but it has been reported that it might develop 617 horsepower and 553 pound-feet of torque. It's only a couple days after the podcast drops, we'll find out what the OCTA is all about.
Can we get a link to this picture on the show notes? Because I want our listeners to take a look at this thing, because I need some help figuring out what this satanic message that's built into the development camo is. Maybe somebody with better eyes than me can make it out. But there's something in that development camo.
There's some, it looks like eyes or dots and some stripes here. Yeah. This article goes on to say, in addition to the OCTA, Land Rover will have a whole bunch of other rides on display at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. These include Range Rover Sport, Range Rover Velar, the Evoque, the SV Burford Edition, the Range Rover Sport SV, and an original Range Rover from the 1970s. Jaguar will also showcase various models and will demonstrate its Formula E racer on the hill climb. Expect that at the Goodwood Festival of Speed.
Well, I've been really slacking because I didn't realize that Jaguar was doing a Formula E. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Should they not?
No, they absolutely should. I just wasn't paying attention.
Being an all-electric brand with a history in racing.
And another note from JLR in Korea, the Range Rover Velar looks to be called the Range Rover Bella. That was cool to see. It has a different name. They mentioned the Range Rover Vela, but I think that was some sort of conversion typo in the article. But it looks like they call it. The Range Rover Vela was first introduced in Korea in 2017. It's the first model to introduce the so-called reductionist design philosophy. So that's the Velar.
There's that Jerryism again.
Yes, it is. And hasn't stopped.
It's interesting. Some of the languages tend to assume a V or a B is very similar. So actually, I like the use of Bella for that.
And speaking of the Velar, or I guess Bella, maybe, the 2024 Range Rover Velar embraces simplicity a little too much. This is a Car Buzz review of the 2024 Velar. I'll read you a little bit. The Range Rover Velar fits in. It's a mid-level Range Rover slotting in above the tiny Evoque, but below the Range Rover Sport. Land Rover introduced the Velar in 2017. The model was recently given a mild refresh in 2024, coming in as one of the more affordable vehicles to wear a Range Rover badge. The Velar should be able to make a strong case for itself in the compact luxury crossover segment. But after spending a week driving the dynamic Velar SE, we aren't sure if it can justify a nearly $80,000 price tag. And I will let you go on if you're interested in the Velar, reading about the interior, the exterior.
I'm just having trouble, those two words being mashed together in the same sentence. Affordable and Range Rover. Just something about that doesn't sit well.
Agreed.
And the Velar was the model that they introduced the very austere interior. So
that was Jerry's first really foray into reductionist and letting people know what was coming.
The artistry of minimalism.
Mm-hmm.
And then a video review of the Disco Sport This is from what car? It's about 10 minutes, 39 seconds out of the UK. If you're interested in buying one, I think it'd be a good review of the car and how it works. If you're curious about and would like to drool over the fact that they get diesel engines in the UK and not here, yeah, maybe not watch around the 7-minute mark, because that's when they talk about the diesel. And then next is from Driving Sports TV. This is a review of the 2024 Defender. This is the county edition, and they do a full off-road test. They do this up in the Pacific Northwest, I think out of Washington State here in the U.S., and this is about a 25-minute video where he actually does take it off-road and does some challenging aspects of the dedicated course they've built, where they've taken G-Wagons and Land Cruisers and the Lexus and the Grenadier off onto, and they do some comparison to the Grenadier. Of course, it acquits itself pretty well. The gentleman likes the car and likes how it operates. But this one, this county edition, with its all white except for the blue roof and the blue rear door, the color combination's
I would have done that
okay.
the other way around. I would have done a blue truck with a white roof.
That would be better. But the thing I can't get over are these steel wheels that are not steel. They're either, I don't know if is it like a cover, almost like a hubcap, or is it all
I think it's an
alloy?
alloy wheel just made to look like a steel one.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And
I guess it's a good counterpoint to the wheels on my Dodge pickup, which are steel but look like they're aluminum.
Yeah, I think it's just probably like the weight savings that they're going for there, because it's not a money savings.
And it's not like steel is being rationed anymore.
But if you'd like to see how a 2024 110 does off-road, go check this video out. They did a good job. Shows you how it works and different mode settings, which was cool. So that's a good one. Next, the Defender Service Awards in North America are back. They have been announced. The Defender brand announces the 4th annual Defender Service Awards. The Defender Service Awards recognize U.S., Puerto Rico nonprofits, and Canadian charitable organizations that exemplify the unstoppable essence of Defender. Organizations are encouraged to submit videos on how a new Defender 130 would support their respective mission in one of 6 categories. Looks like these categories are the same. They have the Veterans and Civil Service, Community Service Award, Search and Rescue, Outdoor Accessibility Education Award, Animal, Wildlife, and Marine Mammal Wildlife, and the Defender Service honorees. These are the past finalists who are given a second chance. Submissions are open from June 17th of 2024 through July 29th of 2024, followed by a judging period by a panel of qualified judges. The finalist video will be posted on Land Rover USA and landrover.ca for public voting beginning in October, and winners will be announced in the fall 2024. So just like last year. My guess is there's going to be another Destination Defender, and I'll probably announce the winners there like they did last year.
Didn't they have an additional category for like a second chance for previous non-winners?
Yeah, that's the second chance. That's the Defender Service honorees.
Okay. I wonder, do they have to enter again, or are they automatically entered?
It's not clear to me here. It just says Defender Service honorees past 21, 22, 23 finalists who are given a second chance to win a 130. I know I don't recall how that happens.
I wonder if we should reach out to our friends at Allegheny Mountain Rescue.
Next up, I think someone's been listening to the podcast and put this together. This is 10 cars with ridiculously long names.
Someone actually listens to this show?
Maybe. That's a guess. What? Yeah, that'd be cool. The Renault
We're
Megane.
Not completely wasting our time.
The Renault Megane Renault Sport 230 F1 Team R26. That is, in fact, a vehicle name. I'm not going to do my Italian. Alfa Romeo Giulietta Quadrifoglio Verde Launch Edition. The Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution VI GSR Tommy McKinnon Edition. The Subaru Impreza WRX SDI TS Type RA NBR Challenge. That's a name. The Porsche Cayenne Turbo E-Hybrid Coupe with GT package. That's the full name. Mercedes AMG A45 4MATIC Petronas 2015 World Champion Edition. Lamborghini Murcielago LP670-4 Super Veloce China Limited Edition. Then the Toyota GR Yaris RZ High Performance Cali Rovenpera Edition. Oh, this one's good. BMW Individual M760 Li X-Drive Model V12 Excellence the Next 100 Years. That's the full name. And of course, one of our favorites here on the list, the Land Rover, Range Rover, Velar, SVAutobiography Dynamic Edition. And they have a little explanation of each of these. I'll read you the Land Rover one. Until last year, when Land Rover did what everyone had been doing mentally forever and spun Range Rover off on its own distinct sub-brand, all Range Rovers were officially Land Rover Range Rovers. This was clumsy enough before LR started to produce more Range Rover models like the Sport Evoque and the Velar. Clearly unsatisfied with the Land Rover Range Rover Velar, though, it later came up with this heffalump of a name, the SVAutobiography, with its ultra-luxe version of the Velar equipped with JLR's lovely supercharged V8. The Dynamic Edition brought with it some handling-oriented chassis tweaks and somehow 2 more words.
Just be glad they didn't come out with the Land Rover Range Rover Road Rover.
Oh, that's true, because the Velar might have been called the Road Rover.
I'm still crossing my fingers on that one, but it's looking less likely with the House of Brands.
Maybe because then it would be the Land Rover Range Rover Rover SVAutobiography Dynamic Edition.
HSE.
HSE.
Careful, that might be another House of Brands, the Road Rover.
Oh, we do need more brands.
Apparently. This past month in June was the Bantam Jeep Heritage Festival here in Western Pennsylvania, specifically in Butler, Pennsylvania, which is about 20, 25, 30 miles northeast of Pittsburgh. They have a Heritage Jeep Festival. If you want to know why, there's a good news report. We'll have a link to that from KDK News about the festival, because the Jeep's birthplace is in Butler, Pennsylvania. That's why they celebrate the Bantam Jeep Heritage Festival there. And if it wasn't for Jeep, it is pretty well thought that there would not be a Land Rover. So there is a connection between the two.
And if there was no Austin 7, there would be no Bantam motor cars. Again, Austin 7 is the DNA behind just about everything on the planet.
Of course, I don't think they know that or mention it at the Bantam Jeep Festival, Harold. But yeah,
we'll have to go back through the back issues of the podcast, because I seem to remember somebody talking about that.
I believe so. So go check that out if you want to know more about the connection back to Jeep. And finally, in the news, Land Rover will celebrate its ties to the British royal family at Pebble Beach. The British royal family has stood proud as one of Land Rover VIP customers for decades. While the brand is in the process of splitting into 3 entities, editorial comment, maybe more, it will reunite at the 2024 Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance to highlight 10 of the off-roaders it has built for British royalty. Putting together the display was easier said than done. Some of the vehicles still belong to the royal family, while others are in private collections. Land Rover Classic Division still owns a few, and the rest normally live at the British Motor Museum. Land Rover notes this will be the first time these 10 vehicles are displayed together in the United States, and it will throw a British garden party to mark the occasion. The oldest model in the display is a 1951 Series 1 State Review vehicle. It is the first of its kind, and it was built to take Queen Elizabeth II and her husband, Prince Philip, on a 6-month tour of the Commonwealth. Several examples were built, and the one that Land Rover will show in Pebble Beach was used by the royal couple to drive around Australia. We're told that it notably features a custom-designed rear platform. That's so she can stand in the back of it.
That's the one that's sometimes referred to as the Royal Pope Mobile.
At the other end of the spectrum, the newest SUV is a 2009 Range Rover that wears registration numbers CK58 and PJ. Land Rover claims this model became Queen Elizabeth II's favorite vehicle after it joined the royal fleet, and she was often seen behind the wheel. The Labrador ornament that was added to the hood won't be on display in Pebble Beach, as it was, quote-unquote, removed for safekeeping, according to the firm. The rest of the collection retraces the royal family's ties to Land Rover. There's a 66 Series 2A station wagon that stands out as the first example powered by a 6-cylinder engine. It also features leather upholstery, side steps, and a wooden dog guard, among other equipment requested by the royal family. By 1974, the original Range Rover had become the preferred state review vehicle, and one example that was used from 75 to 2002 will be displayed in Pebble Beach. It has folding rear seats and concealed umbrella. And Pebble Beach is taking place August 18th, 2024. So you can go check out those. The press release goes through all the vehicles that are there. So let's take a look at those. So there's we already mentioned the state review vehicle from 1954, the Series 1. It's a custom design rear platform. We already talked about that. It was sent to Australia. There's the 1954 Series 1 NXN1, originally ordered by George VI. It was used by Queen Elizabeth II and senior members of the royal family of Balmoral. It was restored in 2010 and now resides in the Land Rover Classic Collection. 1958 Series 2 State Review vehicle, the second official ceremonial review Land Rover, featured blue side light lenses, which were switched on whenever a member of the royal family was being carried. Oh, it's the flag going up. There's the royal standard. So it's like the blue lights are like the royal standard.
The Queen is in residence upon the vehicle.
She's alighted to the Land Rover. This example was a reserve vehicle, which explains its low mileage of 13,000 miles. It's the Royal Collection at Gaydon. 1966 Land Rover Series 2 station wagon, driven by Queen Elizabeth. This was the first station wagon of its kind to be fitted with a 6-cylinder engine. Special vehicles, leather seat, wooden dog guard, side steps, and it's in the Royal Collection also at Gaydon. The 74 Range Rover State Review vehicle. This was used until 2002, modified, including fold-away seats and a lectern containing concealed umbrella. An additional exhaust silencer ensured noise from the V8 engine was kept to a minimum. It now forms part of the Royal Collection at Gaydon. There's the 1990 State Review vehicle. This is the third State Review Range Rover. And apparently it was chosen by Elizabeth II for her 1994 Christmas card, where she and Prince Philip were pictured attending the 50th anniversary of D-Day landings. The vehicle is part of the British Motor Museum collection. There's an 83 Defender 110 V8, a personal vehicle used by Queen Elizabeth at Sandringham. The vehicle is part of the private royal collection and having been commissioned by the Queen as part of the active royal fleet. And finally, the 2009 Range Rover. There are numerous pictures of Queen Elizabeth behind the wheel of this Range Rover, as it was a favored vehicle after it joined the fleet. The famous Labrador mascot has been removed, as we mentioned before, for safekeeping. So that's a nice collection.
I'm drawn to the 2A with the 6-cylinder in it. I'm trying to figure out if they were planning that or whether she said, you boys really need to put a bigger engine in this thing for me.
That might have been Philip.
Oh, I think Her Majesty the Queen liked a little bit of horsepower from time to time as well.
I agree.
She was a trucker after all.
That's right.
I'm impressed that they're sending these to former colony. So to be shown off. But I see
shortly after we celebrate our treason from them.
That's right.
Exactly. But I see why they decided to remove the Labrador hood ornament. They don't trust us that far.
Those Yanks will steal anything that's not properly bolted down.
You'll notice, though, they did wait until she was no longer with us to send them over.
Yeah.
Yes.
I hope I'm not alive to see this.
Another interesting bit of note, especially around the royal part of this, in April of 2024, Charles III granted JLR a royal warrant in his initial list of grantees. This extends the relationship with the warrants into the current monarchy. So I think it was the only, vehicle manufacturer left that had a royal warrant. So I guess that continues. Does JLR get the royal warrant since there's, or does it go to each brand since there's a house of brands now? Because it used to be Land Rover.
I'm guessing that Charles is, I'm not signing that many warrants. You're going to get one for the whole company and like it.
I wonder if that is only valid for vehicles that are still manufactured in Great Britain.
There might be a condition in there somewhere that it won't apply to any Chinese-built Freelanders.
We just pulled up the LandRover.com website to check the royal warrant, and it's still there, but this one says, by appointment to Her Majesty the Queen, manufacturers of motor vehicles, Jaguar Land Rover Limited, Coventry. They need to update the Land Rovers behind here. Look at this on their website.
Yeah.
Again, they need to update. There's only one Royal Warrant on the website at the moment. It's just that one, Elizabeth. It's been several months. Come on, get that updated.
It's been a little bit more than that.
They said April 2024 is when they made the announcement that they got the Royal Warrant, the new one.
Thinking she has been deceased for longer than that.
Yes.
But you're right. Yeah, the update of the warrant was just April.
On that note, that is the news for June of 2024. And now welcome to the podcast, Land Rover Royalty. His name is Doug Mays. Doug, you participated in the 1997 Camel Trophy in Mongolia. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, John. Great to join you and Harold today. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at the Pacific Northwest Rally. You were one of the folks giving presentations, and you were nice enough to come down to the rally yourself, and I got to see the presentation live, and I immediately jumped up and said, got to get you on the podcast. Someone else who participated in the Campbell Trophy. It's so cool. So welcome. Really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was a fun event, and I didn't know it at the time, but they said, hey, can you be the celebrity of the day? It's like, celebrity of the day? Sure, okay, I'll try that.
That's an interesting hat to have to wear.
Exactly. It's been 27 years since I went on the event, and so in preparation of that, I had to pull together a bunch of 50 millimeter slides and get them converted to PowerPoint. So that was a good exercise to go through to get the cobwebs out and remember a lot of things that took place. And it really is a once in a lifetime adventure for me, for sure.
Was that the first time you talked about the Camel Trophy at the Pacific Northwest Rally?
It was at the rally, yes. Yeah. Now, after the event in 97, I went on I was like the Rotary Club guest speaker all up and down the I-5 corridor of Oregon, explaining my adventures in Mongolia. That went on for a couple years, and I had everything on.
I bet the Rotary ate that up.
Oh, yeah, it was fun. But everything was on a Kodak, the old Kodak carousels.
Oh, yeah, all the slides. Yeah. You had a slide.
Yes,
literally, you were the guy with a slideshow.
So they asked me to join in the Anarch rally. It's, oh, yeah, I've got my carousel. It's, okay, wait a minute, Mace. You probably better step up to 2024, and so I converted them all, and it came out pretty good. So,
how many times did you have to explain what a carousel was?
Yes, to baby boomers, I didn't have to explain that. Others, yes.
All right. Before we do get to it, I want to let folks know, yes, Doug does not have a strict Land Rover pass, which is okay. He participated in the Camel Trophy. That's enough. That's enough. That makes you Land Rover royalty right there. You get a pass for life. Whether you drive a Land Rover or not, you were in the Camel Trophy. So how did that come about? And that was 1997. Yeah. I assume it's a couple of years before that, before you actually to get involved.
Oddly enough, John, it was only about 6 months beforehand. And I really had not known, hadn't heard much about it. And I have some friends that were rally drivers here in the Pacific Northwest, and I used to help them out. Was their part of their pit crew. And at the time I'm a forest engineer by background. So my career was spent in the timber industry. And at the time I was a logging foreman. And
those forestry roads real well then that they were rallying on.
I do. And I did. In fact, I drove about 40,000 miles of logging roads every year as part of my job. But my friends that were on the rally, they said, hey, you should try out for Camel Trophy. I don't even know, what is Camel Trophy? And so I looked, I think I found it in a four-wheeler magazine and read an article. And at the time, it was really considered the Olympics of four-wheeling. Yet they would travel all over the world to exotic locations, very remote. They described it as really neither a race nor a rally. And I think one of the founders of it, or one of the early participants, a guy named Ian Chapman, called it Camel Trophy was first and foremost an adventurous expedition, included an element of competition where participating teams could test their 4x4 driving skills and mechanical skills. But there's a lot of endurance and stamina, courage, perseverance, and really against the worst that nature could offer. That's how Ian described it in this article. That sounds really cool. And it had the pictures of these guys in like a caravan going through, I think it was Borneo, in a jungle on a single track, literally building bridges to get across creeks. And it's, hey, that's what I was trained to do that. And so I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to try it. There's an application in the magazine, and I put in my application. I was teeter-tottering on to do it or not, and I'll go ahead and do it. And it was about a five-page essay or application explaining why and all that. And
so you had to give like long written answers?
Yeah.
So as part of the application?
Yeah, it was probably a 2 or 3 page essay as to why.
Right.
They gave you some sideboards on what to turn in. And I did. I mailed it, I think, the day before it was due. And lo and behold, that was in September. And I think in early October, a guy named Tom Collins called me. And Tom is just a fantastic guy. You've probably heard of him. He's really, he's just the world's best in terms of anything you want to know about four-wheeling. That's Tom Collins. But Tom called me, interviewed me, had an interview, want to know about myself, and he's sizing me up because they had, I think the year I did it, I think they had 1,500 applicants in the U.S. And as he was telling me, they have over 1 million worldwide. It's really big in Europe. And it's like, wow, I had no idea. And at the end of the interview, he said, Doug, I'd like to extend an offer to you to try out for the U.S. trials that will be held in Social Circle, Georgia. Hey, that's fantastic. And I had known about some of the stuff they had done after reading that article. And but I asked him, I said, Tom, how should I prepare? I don't have a Land Rover, but I know 4x4 skills. I know how to recover a vehicle. I know about winching. I know about lines. I can splice and all kinds of stuff. I know about blocks. And he says, no, that would be good. He said, it's in 3 weeks. I think it was it was about 6 weeks. It was in December. He says, well, you might get out your mountain bike and try a little mountain biking. I would practice up on some orienteering and then also some kayaking. And I said, that hasn't been what the past Camel Trophies were all about. He says, no, it hasn't. Embrace the unknown is what he said. And I said, okay. And fortunately for me, I did like the mountain bike. I wasn't a fantastic kayaker, but I could do it. And then orienteering, reading maps, and I was in pretty good shape, getting around, finding my way around in the woods. That was not an issue. But oddly enough, I think Tom must have known, but that was actually for Camel Trophy Mongolia, Embrace the Unknown was the theme, essentially, because they were transitioning from basically just driving and special skills to include these 3 other disciplines.
This became the adventuring part, instead of just strictly being a orienteering and off-roading and challenging you in the vehicle.
Yep. So past events, it was driving and getting your way through and taking on special skills. And this one, it was in the 4 disciplines. So you had equal points for kayaking, mountain biking, orienteering, and then, of course, 4x4 driving. So that was how the event was set up. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Yeah,
if I may ask you, just to go back a tad, your off-road recovery skills, was that mainly from your work in the forestry service or in the forestry field, or was that from something else that you had some as a kid, or did you have a family member that took you off-roading?
It was from, so John, have you ever been around loggers?
No.
Well, loggers have a tendency to get their pickup stuck.
Aha.
And I can put myself in that category as well.
Right.
But yeah, when you're working in the woods, running logging crews in the Oregon Cascades, we operate year round, snow, mud, all that. Invariably, you have to recover vehicles that get stuck, and everything from actually like a D8 cat getting stuck to logging equipment getting stuck, and then actually just logging, about getting logs from trees from the side of the mountain up to the road. That's like a recovery thing too.
Dead weight then.
Yeah.
That's literally dead weight. Yes. The only thing I know about logging is what I know from the Johnstown flood of 20 something or something like that. There's Johnstown, Pennsylvania, famous for having its flood because it was all about logging. They were taking the logs down the dam, and the dam broke. Yes. All right, so it's late '96. Tom Collins has now invited you to do the testing phase. How many people were involved in this U.S. testing?
Yeah, there were 10. I think they were invited. I think one couldn't make it, one dropped out, so there are 8 of us. And that was we started at 6 in the morning and we finished noon the next day. So you didn't sleep. You did all the disciplines I talked about, but at the same time, John, they're really wanting to understand how well you work with people and how you get along. It's over a 3-week adventure. You're out on your own, and people skills are important. Leadership is important. And
you're going to be stuck in a small vehicle, two people for 3.5 weeks. You two better get along.
Exactly. At the end of that, it was fun, but there are 4 of us selected. Will Burkhart, from a real estate guy from Denver. David Kelly, he was a marketing guy from California. Chris Van Est, who was from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and myself. And so after that, we were the finalists. So finalists, the U.S. finalists, and we had 2 or 3 different trainings under the tutelage of Tom Collins and a handful of ex-Camel Trophy guys. So like Jim West, Webb Arnold, I'm trying to think, maybe Jim Sweat. I think Jim was on the actual event. And these guys are just fantastic people, but they're great teachers as well. So we spent leading up to the next phase to get through was international selections, and that was in Sevilla, Spain. And so I think we had 2 or 3 long weekends in Grand Junction, Colorado, and it was similar stuff. So they would pair Doug up with Chris. They'd pair Chris up with David. And the different combinations. And I didn't realize it at the time, but they're really formulating, I think, 2 teams to go to the international selections. And
so are they like pairing you up with you're doing different pairings and then seeing how well you guys work together.
Correct. Yep. And we just had a great group of guys. We all got along super. So there was really no issues there. We liked each other. It was a fun
Probably made for a difficult decision for them to select.
Yes. Yeah. And so we were off. In March, I believe, we went to Sevilla, Spain.
Can I pause you to ask, because you were in Grand Junction, do you know Bill Burke was also a participant? And is Bill in Grand Junction at this time helping out with the selection process?
I think he might. I don't really remember Bill, but I think he was.
Okay.
I dropped a couple names. It's been 27 years.
Yes.
I think he was.
Hard to forget a character like Bill.
And then I think, too, there are a couple times, Harold, where they'd actually have some Land Rover reps that were involved, because it's an important event for Land Rover. They were at the U.S. selections, and they are also at the international selections in Sevilla, Spain. Sevilla, Spain, that was a 5-day assessment. And so you had a total of 20 country teams. And so if you think about those 20 different country teams, those are really big Land Rover markets, right? Yeah. Germany, France, UK, of course, US, Morocco, Canary Islands, lots of different. And so 80 finalists, right? Four per team. And it wasn't 24/7. We did get about 7 hours sleep each night, but they were tough. And they had us doing crazy stuff too. So testing us on the different disciplines. As an example too, they had us tow a Land Rover, I think it was a 110, on a barge across this huge lake. And we towed it with our kayaks.
Oh, wow.
Paddling.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we hooked a rope from our kayak to this barge with a 110 on it, and we paddled it across a half-mile lake, I think, and it was all timed. So it was the 2 country team. So
was there current involved?
It was a lake, fortunately, Harold.
Because I could see that going so wrong so quickly.
Yes.
Is it one kayak, 2 guys in the kayak?
Yeah, it's a kayak sorry, John, I didn't explain that very well. Yeah, it's a 2-man kayak. So you got 2 holes, one in front and one in back. We were just tandem pulling this thing across the lake.
A twin engine tugboat.
This almost sounds like something Top Gear would have done.
It was very Top Gear-ish, actually. It was cool.
That's where Top Gear got some of its ideas.
Failure. I was going to say, without the epic failure.
Yes. Just quickly on that, what really struck me about the Sevilla international selections, there was a microphone in your face all the time because there was a lot of press there and cameras, and it was just a really unique experience. You got used to that. And
that was a first time for you, probably having some attention on you.
Yeah, like that. Yes, true. Yeah.
And were you being evaluated on your ability to deal with the press and the microphones?
I think there's definitely an element of how you communicate and your communication skills and just how you interact with people. And then I can't tell this joke, but during my slide at the Anarch Rally, I had one slide in there. I'm standing in front of Land Rover with a couple Mongolians, and my wife says, "Hey, you got to get that slide in there because you looked hot then." It's then, I'm not hot now. What's the deal?
Wow. But from your own wife.
So it was all good. But to your question, Harold, we were spread out. The 4 candidates from the U.S. were spread out around the country, and I think we were all pretty well spoken in that regard. And so, yeah, I do think it was a tough decision, but I think your ability to communicate and whatever you want to call it, camera presence, whatever that unknown is, just presence, I think that was evaluated somehow. I never really heard how, but lo and behold, though, when it was all over, Chris Van Ness and myself were selected to go to Mongolia.
How long after the selection does Mongolia start?
So that was in the 3rd week of March. Mongolia was the first or second week of May. Well, we had about 8 weeks, a little less, 7 weeks to prepare.
Did you and Chris then work together back in Colorado in preparation?
Yes, we did. And we did a lot of training there. Maybe a quick comment on that. Those are actually some of my fondest Camel Trophy memories, just getting ready and prepping ourselves and working with Tom Collins and his Camel Trophy crew of guys. Just a tremendous group of people. Webb Arnold, I mentioned Tom, just super great people. And one time we were out after, I think it was close to midnight. We started at 6. We went to this OHV park out of Grand Junction it was just a mud fest. And we trudged our way through this thing with pull pals. There's no trees there. It was just, we had to pull pal our way back from whatever canyon we got into. And we were covered in mud. And so we went into Applebee's, was still open, and we're covered in mud. And Tom says, "I'll get you in there just a minute." He comes back out. He says, "Okay, guys, down to your skivvies. They'll let us in. They'll sit us in back." So we didn't get mud all over the restaurant. So funny. Had another training event where one of the Camel Trophy cars, we were practicing going in the river, and it wasn't Chris or I, it was one of the ex-Camel Trophy guys, got a little close to the Gunnison River, and the car started to float. And the car actually, he was okay. He got out. It was Webb, but the car was underwater for 24 hours. And this was an ex-Camel Trophy car. I don't remember what year it was. I think it was in the 94 Camel Trophy. And it was underwater for 24 hours. We pulled it out that next day with 2 other Camel Trophy cars with winches, had a diver go down, found it, hooked it up. We pulled it out. And then that became a training, because it's, "Okay, guys, you've got to get that thing running by tomorrow." We got it up to the shop, dumped all the fluids, pulled all the injectors, new batteries, had it going in about 5 hours, I think.
Oh, excellent.
And we ran it that next day. Just that's a testament of how tough those vehicles are.
Yeah.
Discovery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Diesel
that's
Discovery.
Really cool. That was a diesel. That makes some sense then.
Of course it was.
Yes.
TDI.
TDI, yep.
It's the only way to go.
Yeah, I wish we could get them here, Harold. Oh, you can.
Now
yeah.
you can.
Takes a little bit. So we had a couple weekends there again, and then we were off. We flew into Mongolia, or actually we took a plane from LA to Seoul, Korea, and then we took Mongolian Air to Mongolia. And Mongolia, it's really one of the world's more isolated countries. And as we were coming into Mongolia to land, the plane aborted 2 different approaches. I didn't really know why. So we landed, we got off, and I was talking to someone. So what happened? He said, there are cows on the runway. Had to get the cows off the runway. And so the first morning there, I woke up. I think we had 2 days there before the event. We stayed in the Genghis Khan Hotel in downtown.
As one does.
In downtown Ulaanbaatar. And I walked out the steps that next morning, and there were 3 cows walking down the sidewalk. So it was just a really unique.
Was that the only hotel in?
No, there are a couple, but that at the time was probably one of the.
That was probably
nicest.
I'm sure that was the nicest hotel. I'm sure Land Rover was taking care of you guys.
Land Rover did it right.
Yeah.
But from there, we had a day to get our rigs ready. So 20 different TDI discoveries, 1997 model. Ours had, I think, 300 miles on it. And each vehicle was equally equipped. So same 2-man kayak, same 2 mountain bikes, all the kit. We had an EPIRB in the car, had comms, so low band, I think, radio.
Did they put like skid plates on and I guess winches, bull bars, and the such?
Yep.
Were these factory prepped at the special vehicles shop?
They were. Yes, they were. And they had an integrated rack up on top. So everything fit in the rack. And they had an internal roll cage in the cars. And then you had a cage from the luggage compartment in the back.
So that would have been probably special just for the Camel Trophy, I take it.
Yes. Yeah.
Never seen a disco with a cage in it. So that would definitely have to be special.
Yeah.
That and it had a snorkel, had a metal snorkel, driver's side. You basically run that car. As long as you can breathe, you can run it in water. That's the rule.
And I think it had steel wheels, correct?
Actually, this was the first event that they had alloy wheels.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yep. All the past were steel wheels, and these were alloy rim. I think they ran Brigstone. All I remember is early on, we had a chance. You had a decision. You could either take an extra tank of diesel, like a jerry can, or if you didn't want to do that, you could take a mounted spare. And we opted to take the spare, which was fortunate because in one of the competitions, we got 2 flat, really a lot of volcanic rock in Mongolia. And
a lot like the Pacific Northwest Rally, by the way. There's a volcanic rock I'd never encountered before. Yeah.
In fact, actually, funny, it's on the same latitude as Central Oregon. And so it's just on the opposite side of the earth.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so fortunately we had spares. But I think 2 weeks in, they flew a plane from London with 40 mounted Camel Trophy tires because they're getting so many flats and ripping up tires.
Oh.
They overnighted them.
Wow. Wow.
So kind of interesting too. Chris and I drove. You have 2 journalists. And they rode in the back seat. Halfway through, they switched journalists, photographer, journalist. So we had a total of 4 with us when it was all over.
So you're in prep and you're making your selections for that day, getting ready, meeting, I guess, other contestants. And how does it begin? Do they have a send off? Is there does everybody start at the same time? How does the whole event actually kick off?
So this was quite a variation from past events. So on this first in Mongolia, you literally caravanned out of the capital together. They had a huge opening ceremony at Ulaanbaatar, the capital square. We lined all the cars up. Mongolians came in with our respective country flag and delivered it to our vehicle. And so we went out in a caravan with our flags. And guys, there was like thousands of people there lining the streets. It was really cool. You're just driving through a little alley of nothing but people hollering and waving. Wow. And the plan was the prime minister he addressed us, wished us well, and the plan was he was going to lead out of the square on a horse. But he told the event director, Nick Horn, I'm not riding a horse. I want to drive a camel car. So he drove Horn's Camel Trophy car.
Yes, he was. Smart man. Exactly. It's a vehicle rally. I don't want to be on a horse.
We all went by, and then as we went out of the square, Mongolian maiden sprinkled mare's milk on each car, and that was a Mongolian good luck ceremony.
Well, as you said, there's cows everywhere.
Exactly.
Sounds like it's part of their culture.
So that first event or that first day, they put together what was called a mini Nadam. And Nadam is an annual celebration in Mongolia where they celebrate the three main games of men is what it is. And women participate in two of those three. So horsemanship, archery, and then wrestling. The women didn't participate in the wrestling, but they held this event at a place called Turtle Rock. And it's this huge monolith that looked just like a turtle. It's an ancient sacred spot for Mongolians. It was just a tremendous backdrop. I think, John, I sent you my slides from that, but
yes, a lot of slides to go through. Yeah. I'm trying to keep up. Yeah,
So from there, we were on to the first competition site, and every competition site, there were no two competition disciplines. There were two of each of the four disciplines at each of the 8 sites, but they had a different twist on it. So you'd have maybe a mountain biking race, then you'd go to a kayaking thing, then you'd go into a technical 4x4 driving or a winching exercise, and then on to a orienteering event. And so you'd have 2 of these at each site, and you went from kayaking, say, to orienteering or to driving. And each of those disciplines, you had to be dressed in a specific uniform. And they're very rigid, stringent on that, because it's all about the PR and make sure you have the right uniforms, right? Everything was sponsored by Worldwide Brands, which was a subsidiary of RJR Nabrisco. And so they had this adventure luggage stuff. And I remember that you'd have about eight hours of competing, but I'm not kidding. You were changing all the time. You were changing your clothes to go to the net. And you're not in like you're just out there doing it. So it was pretty unique. But that was the first, and all the 8 different sites were similar to that. And you got points for how well you placed. And if you were first, you got 20 points. If you were last, you got 0. That's how it worked. But what was unique was after that first site, they came to us and they gave us a big stack of Russian military contour maps with Latin longs. And then they also had a list with 7 other Latin long sites and a time when your competition started. And you were on your own. So you had to find your way to that competition site. And so we'd typically sit down for an hour or so, and we'd plot our way using the contour maps. And
to be clear for maybe some younger listeners, we're talking maps, no GPS, you're using a compass.
And it's a piece of paper with squiggles on it.
Correct.
And it's written in Russian, apparently.
Yes, it was.
Oh, that's right. Good point, Harold. Yes, it's in Russian.
Yeah.
So the Russian team probably had an advantage there.
They did, actually. In fact, Harold, we traveled with the Russians between a couple different event sites because the second language in Mongolia is Russian. So it was handy. What I was going to say is on those, we did have GPS, John, but it was literally the old Garmin big square GPS units.
Right.
And all it just read your Latin long.
There
was no.
It might tell you your
Google
heading.
map.
That's about it.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Your distance and your speed.
Right. Altitude. That's
right.
That's it.
Yeah, yes. Pretty basic stuff. But at the time, that was cool. Right?
Oh yeah.
We would navigate our way to the different sites, and you learned after a while. There you go, just like that, Harold. Really close. Except ours was probably twice as wide. It was like a brick.
Mine's a civilian version. So
yes.
But yeah, you're right. It says nothing.
Yes, exactly.
A couple of numbers and that's it.
What I learned is that after a while, you'd get hung up trying to find a road. Don't worry about the roads. There's 1,000 miles of pavement at the time in Mongolia, and most of that was around Ulaanbaatar. The rest of it, you would pull into a huge valley, as an example, and you would be like looking at little single tracks, like spaghetti on the ground, just roads and tracks going all over the place. And so from horses, and they didn't have a lot of infrastructure.
Carts and
correct.
Yeah, horse-drawn carts and such. Not a lot of cars, I take it. Are there a lot of people as you're going through the different trails? Are you encountering a lot of folks?
That's what really amazed me, because before I left, they gave us a Mongolian packet to study up on stuff. And so, okay, there's about 2 million people in Mongolia, and about half of them are between Ulaanbaatar and I don't remember the name of a couple other cities. And then 50% of the population is nomadic at the time. And so literally we would be out in the middle between competition sites. It would take 2 to 3 days to get there. So you would camp. You'd have all your gear, you'd car camp, you tent, you cook, you're on your own. We had to have 75 pounds, couldn't bring over 75 pounds for all of our gear and food. We would stop somewhere, and after a while, a Mongolian would be coming by on a horse, and then there'd be another and another. And the kids just really gravitated. They wanted to, how in the US, you've got kids that would rat pack with skateboards or mountain bikes, like it's horses there. Everybody rides a horse. I remember saying to myself, how did they get here? But you'd be driving along and you would see what would be called a gur, and we call them yurts here.
Okay.
And the majority, 50% of the population, there would be herdsmen. They'd have their gur set up. They'd set it up 2 to 3 to 4 months in a spot, and they would tend to their herd, whether it's sheep or horses or cows, and then they pack up and move. And so they're really portable. We actually got to get into a couple, and they were just super comfortable, had a stove and everything. I was also struck by just the different modes of transportation. And we would come up over a hill with our Land Rovers, and you'd see a guy riding a motorcycle with a sidecar somewhere, or a big truck with a bunch of people in it. I did see a number of Land Rovers, older Land Rovers there too, which I think speaks well to the brand.
That's very cool. Were the folks surprised, or did they just take it in stride?
No, they took it in stride, and everybody was really fascinated. They wanted to look at the car. They wanted to talk to us. We couldn't talk. We gestured, and we learned a few catchphrases. We write on our maps, like, where are we? Where is this, right? Is this the best route, where you could show them with your finger where you're planning to go? And that also struck me too, is that I didn't meet a Mongolian that was over 21 that couldn't communicate in terms of just looking at the map. They were all, I think if I remember right, the literacy rate in Mongolia was over 90%. I think some of that was a Russian influence at the time. When did the USSR collapse?
96, not 96, 90, I think, right? No, 86. It was 86.
80, yeah.
The 91, I think, is when USSR finally was done.
Yeah. So we're only 5 or 6 years after that, right? And so the pretty strong Russian influence in the country, and they suppressed Buddhism quite a bit. And so at the time, and Mongolia today is still a democracy.
Nestled between China and Russia.
Yeah, it was literally a buffer.
Yes, it is.
For many years.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. In fact, the railroad tracks are different gauge in the north to the south.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Depending on where they're coming from. Yeah. You do that so you make it harder for people to use them for invasion.
We did really well on navigating. That was really one of my favorite things, is mapping your way, figuring it out, embracing where are we going to go, how are we going to get there. We usually traveled with 2 to 3 different teams, found out you're caravanning, and as many of people that 4-wheel, right? If you're out with 2 or 3 or 4 other rigs, it's pretty good. You get 7 or 8 or 10, it's too much logistics going on there.
Did you end up having similar teams all traveling together? Sounds like you were with the Russians. Were you also maybe with the Brits, since you guys spoke English?
Yep, we did. We traveled with South Africans a couple times. We traveled with, I can't remember the last names, but Karen and Trevor from UK. They were great. Traveled with Italy quite a bit, got along really great. I was probably one of the older competitors at the time. The Italy team, so I was 35, and the Italy team, a guy named Piero Poli, was actually an Olympic canoeer, and he was 36. He was also an orthopedic surgeon.
So I'm guessing he nailed the kayak portion of the application.
Exactly. So yeah, it was helpful to travel with people, and we didn't travel with the same team every time. Again, back to the selection process, they did a great job of picking folks. There was no one there that I wouldn't give the shirt off my back to. They're just super people. The Germany team, got along with them great. Guy named Karsten Stocker and Thomas. I don't remember Thomas' last name, but the German guy, Karsten, he was a big raw bone guy. bald head, and he looked like Mr. Clean on the cleaning detergent.
Yes.
So before one of these competitions, we're getting ready to take off, and I looked over at him and go, "You look like Mr. Clean." He's what? I was joking,
Right.
but we got along famously. I think he went on a career with the W. I think he oversaw some of the BMW operations in South America. So traveling some of the sites, we went as far north as a place called Lake Hovsgol, which is about 60 miles from the Russian border. Lake Hovsgol, they say, has about 2% of the world's fresh water. It's a huge lake. A kayaking competition there, but by then that was late third week of May, and the ice was so bad we had to basically kind of break the ice up just to get our kayaks around. So they curtailed that one a little bit. It was just something else to be in that part of the world. Lake Hovsgol is one of the main supply routes in the winter for goods coming out of Russia. They just drive on the lake in the winter.
Ice road truckers, huh?
That's correct. Yes.
So there's kayaking, there's the biking, there was what was the other adventuring? And then there's orienteering, and then off-roading.
Yep, there was another. They had it's called the Land Rover Driving Award, and the Land Rover Driving Award, I think, was points tallied, and so essentially you had to, between competition sites, the Camel Trophy staff would establish what they termed was the ideal route and the ideal distance. And so they didn't tell you what it was. You had the Latin long, and I think between 3 different sites, you were working towards a Land Rover award, driving award for navigation. And darn it, we were second. We just missed winning that one. But that was really fun. We went on through the event. We had a low start, hard start. We were like in the middle of the pack, but as the event went on, Chris and I, we just got stronger. Mountain biking, we did really well in that. We did really well in driving. I think overall we were second in driving and second in mountain biking and fourth in driving. I think we were about the same in orienteering, but our challenge was the 2-man kayaking. I think we were 8th. And so when it was all said and done, I believe we were 5th overall, with the Italian team just edging it out. But Austria won the event that year. I think France was 2nd.
Correct. And then Czech Republic was 3rd, and Italy was
3rd.
4th.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. And the Canary Islands. Who knew there was a big market for Land Rovers in the Canary Islands?
Yes.
Bigger than you might think.
I guess if they compete.
Actually, one of my customers has a Canary truck.
With driving, well, just any of the competitions, you can get amped up, right? You get excited about it. And I remember Tom Collins, one of his really prevailing messages was just, you know what, stay calm, right? Don't get all caught up in stuff. And you're going to have good competitions, and you have others where you don't do very well, but don't beat yourself up, but just stay calm and you'll do fine. As an example, early on, we had a driving competition, and it was timed, and it was one of these technical courses with gates, over hill, cross creek, up a hill, down a hill, through rocks. I think it was the first team, Russia, came down the hill, hard corner to the left. The vehicle did a complete roll. Fortunately, there was a cameraman on the downhill side, and it just missed him. But the vehicle rolled, landed on all 4 tires. All it did was break the driver's side mirror. I couldn't believe it. It was fine.
Do you know how many revolutions it made? Was it several? I take it.
One full. One full revolution, no other damage.
Wow.
And then about an hour later, Greece, a little different part of the course, but they were going up a hill. And instead of, as you're going up or down hills, it's like skiing. You want to ski the fall line, and they got side hill. And so as I got near the top of this probably 200-foot slope, they got to side hill, and the vehicle rolled. And it rolled, I think, 3 times. Nobody was hurt, thank God. But it turned their kayak into a reverse banana. And so that was one of the things, is that was your gear. You didn't get any other gear. And so it hindered them for the rest of the competition.
They packed a few rolls of duct tape.
Yes, they used a lot of duct tape, Harold. Exactly. They had holes in it, and it worked, but
And now we know why they
lost.
put those roll cages in, because if they worked out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And so then there was actually 3. The third roll was Team UK. And I don't remember, it was between competition sites. One thing about Mongolia you'll learn, and it's arid, it's pretty dry, but there's dust. There's all kinds of dust. And I think they were traveling in a team, and I know dust was kind of the root cause, and there was a rock or something. I'm going to screw this up. I don't remember the exact mechanism that kind of caused the quick motion of the wheel, but they were at speed. I think you're going about 40 miles an hour, and swerved. And the vehicles, you've got the kayak on top, you've got 4 people in the car, you got a lot of gear. Rolled, it was a bad roll, and it ended up on its side. Karen McDonald, I think, got like 13 stitches in her arm. Her arm was actually on the edge of the window, and she was fortunate, but she only got stitches. And in fact, this is how tough she was. The doctor recommended that she not participate anymore. She's, no, I'm going to finish this. And so really, really neat woman. But anyway, she did. She finished it. That was the only injury. But the problem was they couldn't open the driver's side door, and it blew out a couple windows. So think about that. That was about halfway through. So you have a lot of these competitions where you have to switch drivers fast. You're all under time. And so they had to bail over the seat console and dive in the window to get in the
Dukes of Hazzard style.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Wow. There you go. And
So
to get out.
Yes.
Not only in, out also.
I bring up those things. I talked about a car underwater that had been through a camel trophy for 24 hours. I talked about these 3 different rollovers. That's how tough these vehicles were. When obviously you have a rollover, there's going to be body damage. Yeah, there's body damage. The doors didn't work, broke windows, mirrors, but mechanically, the suspension, the drivetrains, that little TDI diesel, just rock solid. Those cars all ran great. There was no, if I remember right, there's really no serious breakdown on the entire event.
So the big question at this point, you're talking about how tough the Discovery is and how much abuse they'll put up with. How come you don't own one?
So
what's wrong with you?
Here's what I wanted, Harold, actually. Because I did look into it. Some teams you could buy your Camel Trophy car, and at the time my resources weren't what they are now then, and they were pretty expensive, and so I didn't pursue it. But I did see here recently, I think an old Camel Trophy car sold for, like, in an auction, over $140,000. So
yeah, the genuine ones, even the ones that get left in the bottom of a lake for a day, are still worth some serious money.
Yes. Yeah. They're just tremendously tough vehicle. I was just super impressed by that. About the vehicles and past events, you're going through a jungle. You use your winch all the time, or you build a bridge to get the car across. And we never had to use our winch other than a competition, we never had to extract ourselves with a winch. We got stuck a couple times. There was in Mongolia, there's a lot of permafrost, and we came across this valley, and we were traveling with the Romanians, I think at the time, and they were going, and then they just bury it. And we just drove right next to them. So we'd snap them out, and then same thing would happen to us. So we just took turns snapping each other's cars out with the tow straps, but we never actually needed to use our winch, which was good.
They were also getting away from doing those really hard technical, all muddy in the jungle Camel Trophies where all was a winch fest.
Yeah. 3 weeks in the car with your partner. So Chris was my team member, right? And so have you ever eaten freeze-dried food?
Ice cream a long time ago.
Okay. So if you eat freeze-dried food for a week in a row, so picture it's not good.
Oh no.
Yes. It's
not a lot of fiber, I take it.
I joke.
You do what you got to do sometimes, but it's not a good way to live.
I joke about flatulating our way across Mongolia.
Oh.
Jet propulsion.
Explains why the astronauts used it.
You don't have showers and all that. And so the journalists, they're out camping too. And so we went around a lot with the windows cracked. It got pretty right. But
I guess that would be an advantage to rolling your truck and breaking out all the windows.
yes, yeah, until it got cold, right? So some of the nights there, we had, I think 10 below was the coldest on the northern part of the country. The cars didn't have AC, but they were great for comfort. Where I was going with this is that you're working together as a team. We got along great, but I will share we did have a couple, really only one, where we got into a spirited debate about what route to take. This is probably 2/3 of the way through, and some of the teams were opting to go cross country, and they wanted to use their winches, and they're going to go down this mountain. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. I don't want to jeopardize the car. We had a good route. We all got through it. But Chris and I are still friends. But I just say that because you're 24/7 with this teammate, and then the journalist. I guess another little funny story, when we were getting ready to go in the Gobi Desert, our journalist at the time was Sue Mead, and I don't remember the photographer's name, Greg. We would have tasks. And, okay, you get this, I'll get that. And we just all agreed the journalists would fill up the water cans before we take off the next day. Here we go. We're starting off into the Gobi Desert. And about 2 or 3 hours in, I can't remember
where you're headed.
I can't remember what prompted me, but I said, "Hey, Sue, did you guys get the water?" And because I heard something sloshing. You shouldn't be hearing sloshing. And then she's, oh, no. And it's like, we're going into the Gobi Desert. How could you guys forget the water? And
yeah,
I don't know if you know Sue Mead. She's a great person. In fact, Sue was recently inducted into the 4x4 Hall of Fame, I believe. She's a really famous photojournalist. She at the time, I think she was writing an article for Car and Driver about the event. And I'm not kidding. About an hour after that, we came over this hill, and here's some other Camel Trophy cars at a well. They found a well. And so we were able to fill up our cans, and Sue said, "Yeah, we knew the well was here." It's okay.
Oh, yeah, sure you did.
Nice save. So are they helping you on the technical aspects too?
The journalists?
Yes.
No, but that's part of the rules, was that they could be recruited to help out. As an example, one did, I think it was Switzerland. One of their members broke his shoulder on a mountain bike event. And so I think it was about 2/3 of the way through. So one of the journalists was an okay mountain biker. And so he participated in actually the mountain biking, the kayaking, and the orienteering, and driving too, because I can't remember his name, but I think he had to go home. He had to get surgery.
These discos are automatic or stick?
They're stick, 5-speed.
Just to confirm.
5-speed, 10 gear. Yep. Had lockers, great rigs. Yep.
Yeah.
I think at the end of this thing, I was proud. We had some scrapes and scratches, but I remember I had to zip tie the end caps on the bumpers. We kept blowing the end caps off from time to time. And I was just really proud that, hey, our car was really pretty spotless at the end of the event. And it wasn't, modestly, right? We were pretty good drivers, so we were able to keep the integrity of the car and still do really well in the driving. So,
now, do they give you a right-hand drive car or left-hand drive car?
Yeah.
Does it depend on what your country does, I take it?
Exactly, yeah. So that's how much detail went into this. So, of course, UK had a right-hand drive. Japan had right-hand drive. We had left-hand drive. It was all set up for you. At the international selections, though, every car, if I remember right, was right-hand drive, and that was tough getting used to. But
they didn't tell you that part. Little surprise.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
So, how does everything wrap up for you and Chris on the Camel Trophy?
The last competition site was a place called, I think, Tats Lake, which was near Karakoram. And Karakoram was the ancient Genghis Khan capital of Mongolia, and had this huge backdrop of the monastery there. I think it was over 1,000 years old, and they had this big stage set up. And so that was where, they handed out the awards essentially. And as I had mentioned, we did well. We did not place. We came in 5th, but we were high in the second or third in driving, and second in mountain biking, and orienteering we were fourth or fifth, but the kayak that was our challenge. The kayak
top five is nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, we felt good about that. When Team USA over the past events, I think they actually won it with Tim Hensley and Michael Hussey won it in Sabaya, Malaysia in 1993. So they were first. So that was a first for the U.S. I believe the year that Tom Collins participated, the second best placing, actually there's two second best placing. So Don Floyd and Tom Collins were second for USA in Madagascar in 1987. And Kalimantan in 1996. Kalimantan, it was Ken Cameron and Fred Haas. They did really well. In fact, Ken Cameron today, I believe he has his own 4x4 training company, and he trains like FBI agents and military on off-road driving. He's made a career out of it. So I think it's done really well.
As you're coming into the end, do they hold all the trucks up and then have them like parade in? I take it. Did the locals come out?
Yep. Sorry, John, I didn't explain that very well. Yeah, they had us all put all the cars in a big semicircle. They had a big stage. There were thousands of people there for the award ceremony, and then they opened it up after it was over. And we met with the local Mongolians and gave them rides in the cars and all that. They really liked that.
Did the Prime Minister show back up?
He didn't. I didn't see him there.
It'd be funny if he's okay. Now I want to ride. Now I want to. Yeah.
He didn't show because he couldn't get his horse started.
There you go.
They have a dinner for you.
Yeah. They had a celebration event at the end, and a huge dinner, a big party. It's a little bit fuzzy.
Understood.
But
Understood.
It was good. I do know that I tried mare's milk, which, if you know what that is, that's literally mare's milk.
Is that fermenting
milk? In a leather sack for about 6 months before you drink it. It was something else. So
wow. That'll have a bit of kick to it.
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Yes, I can. Yeah, that's something you probably just try once.
Yeah.
And then they just send you back home and forget about you.
Yeah. And so after that,
it's over. Go home.
It's over.
Get
go
out.
Home. Yes.
After that, it was over. But I kept track with a number of the teams for a couple of years after that. Chris Van Ness and I got together a couple times. It's been probably 10 years, 15 years since I talked to Chris, but there's a great fraternity of ex-Camel Trophy participants. Right. I participated in the 1998 U.S. trials, helping out on that event to evaluate and set up the competitions for the U.S. team. The only thing I regret about Camel Trophy was that right after the event with my career, I got a really big promotion. And the next year they held the event. They drove from Santiago, Chile to Tierra del Fuego. I had an opportunity to pre-scout that with a small team for about a month driving it. I think they were going to set us up in Defenders, and that year they actually used a Freelander event car.
Yay!
But I put my career first. But looking back on it, it's like, God, I should have done that. But it all worked out. So
just a quick question about Mongolia, just to complete that. How long actually is the competition then from beginning to end? How many days?
Yeah, so it was just over. It's 21 days. So
it's that long. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
21 days. 21 days. So
long enough to really hate dehydrated food.
Yes.
Correct. Yes. And fortunately, the Mongolians were all very friendly. In fact, a couple of the Mongolians cooked us meals. We had their yogurt was really good. They had the steaks, so that was good. We didn't have to eat freeze dried the whole time, but they're all extremely friendly people, just tremendous, very accommodating and welcoming.
Have you ever been back to Mongolia?
I haven't, but it would be really neat to go back and see how it's changed. I did in preparation for the event there at the Chute County Fairgrounds, the Anarch event. I did look, and I think today it's about 40% nomadic. It's not as much as when I was there in 27 years ago, but I think it's a very special spot. I do know, too, if you're interested, you can drive a Land Rover in Mongolia. I think there's a couple tour groups there.
Oh, wow.
You can Google it. It's a beautiful. It's just pristine. It's like a huge, just pristine country. It's like a huge wildlife preserve. You'll see, we saw everything from eagles, yaks, deer. It's just beautiful.
Nice.
And is this a tour company that's taking you in the Land Rovers, or do you rent it and they turn you loose?
I think it's a tour company.
Because I think it'd be fun if you show up and they rent it and they hand you a Russian map and say, see ya.
Yeah.
There you go. You're off on your own.
Off you go.
Now you can take your GPS with you, though. And
That's right.
Yes.
They probably have Google Maps on it. I don't know.
No doubt. Exactly. Right. Exactly. It sounds like you keep in touch with Chris. Are you part of that Camel Trophy fraternity? I know there's a Camel Trophy club that gets folks together. Have you participated in any of those activities?
So I haven't, but I've seen a couple of the past, and now that I'm retired, hooray, I'll have a little more time.
Now you can come out and play.
I finished my 40-year career in the timber industry, and I'm really looking forward to doing what I want to do now.
And that now includes you searching for a Land Rover. What are you looking for?
Possibly a Land Rover, correct. I met a couple guys at the Anarch event. One of my friends, Jesse Coombs, actually he's got a company, originaliron.com. He and another guy, Tim, they're supplying parts to old Land Rovers. And Jesse, I think he's got several. I think he's got a TDI Defender. I think he's got an old Series 1 pickup, I believe. And so he's been chewing on me a little about, what are you doing as an ex-Camel Trophy guy, you don't have a Land Rover?
That's the question we all want to know.
Yes, I'm kicking tires. In fact, next week, I'm going to go visit Dan Moogley. He's the general manager of Land Rover Portland. Dan, and at the time, 27 years ago, one of his sales guys, a guy named Randall Clark, was really super helpful. They loaned me a car, Discovery, to drive around as a Trek car, and they wanted me to do well. And for their support, I think it was successful. We did pretty well. I'm going to hand deliver to Dan my presentation, and I'll probably kick a couple tires down there.
Good. Nice. Are you thinking like new, older, classic, or maybe a Disco 1 that you were in Camel Trophy?
You need to get yourself a TDI Disco 1.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the TDI diesel and two rigs. So the little Disco is awesome, and a little Defender 90, that would be cool.
D90, so, that'd be nice. Yeah. That'd be nice.
Yeah. It's hard to have just one, so you don't really have to choose.
Yes. What have you been driving, sir, if it's not a Land Rover?
Yeah, so I have a 2001 Yukon Denali with 320,000 miles on it. I bought one of my old logging foreman pickups years ago. I have an old 2002 Dodge Ram pickup 4x4 with a V10.
Nice.
There you go.
Set up for the woods. Yeah. I think it's got like 433 rear ends in it. That's not quite like a Land Rover, right? The wheelbase.
V10 is much maligned, but it's a cool engine.
Yeah, it is.
It will pull a house. Much easier than a kayak.
That's correct.
Nice. So what does the future hold for Doug Mays now that you're retired and you can do things? Are you planning any adventuring or getting involved in maybe Land Rover rallies?
I would love to participate in another Land Rover rally, but I have also gotten the bug for dual sport motorcycle riding.
Okay.
And so I've been training. Here in the end of July, I'm going to go to Colorado on an 8-day motorcycle camping trip, all backcountry, single track and Jeep trail. In fact, I called Tom Collins because that's in his backyard. And it's, hey, Tom, what am I getting myself into?
Nice.
But we'll be going over Bear Pass and a lot of the routes. And in fact, I think Tom Collins completed the first Trans-American route, a motorcycle route, but he did it with a Land Rover. I think he did it with a Discovery.
Rings a bell, yes.
Because he could.
That's correct. So that, and my wife and I have built a cabin in Central Oregon, and that's really our happy spot. We love just the east side of the Cascade Mountains.
Yeah, it's great country there. I've never been there before. It was amazing.
It's a great place to park your vintage Land Rover when you get it.
That's right.
Harold, you put the words right in my mouth. Exactly. We do need a rig up there, so what would be better?
Land Rover world is your oyster. There's increasing levels of comfort So it depends on if it's going to be you or maybe you and someone special. You need to maybe factor that into consideration.
Yes.
Comfort is overrated.
Now that I'm retired, I'm operating as a DBA under my wife's company, but I've started a company, Maze Consulting Services, and I'm a registered guide in Oregon.
Ooh.
And I've been doing some forest tours. And so I'm thinking, what would be better than to lead a forest tour with a Defender or a Discovery?
Yes.
I think that would be good.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can Section 179 that truck too.
Okay. I'll need some help with that, Harold. Talk to me.
It's business equipment. It's not a vehicle. It's business equipment.
Got it. Yes, absolutely.
You can expense that to your business.
Yeah, I was really hoping you'd give me insight to how to get that TDI from Europe over to here.
Buy yourself a disco. Just get a good disco that's not rusty. And doesn't matter what engine's in it. We can pull that out and drop a TDI in. No problem.
All right. Okay. We can do that.
There were Discoveries that are stick that were available here in the U.S.
Yeah.
But of course, finding one in good shape.
95, you're finding a non-rusty 95 is
In fact, if you guys remember the Trek events,
yes,
yep.
and so a lot of those Trek cars, they were a purpose-built car, the Discovery, and if I remember right, they had the 4-liter gas, but a lot of them were stick, I think.
That I don't know, but that very possible. Yeah,
but they were specced out in the Camel Trophy colors. They had a black hood, and they were
getting away from the Camel, from the cigarettes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Exactly.
and moving to adventuring and choosing it on your own.
I'm not a fan of taking non-genuine Camel Trophy trucks and painting them to look like Camel Trophy trucks. But you, on the other hand, having been an actual competitor, you might get away with it.
Okay.
Yes.
That's the unfortunate part of this was that, so that was 97. The next year was 98. They went to the Freelander and to Terra del Fuego, and it is what it is there. But Land Rover essentially, of course, this is just my opinion, but I think what happened was that the attention from the vehicle, they had these 3 other disciplines included. It wasn't as hardcore, wasn't really demonstrating the capabilities of the vehicle that past events did. And so Land Rover, since the focus on the vehicle was diminished, they ultimately pulled their sponsorship. And so interesting enough, they didn't have one in 97, but in 2000, they went to Tonga, I think, they had Honda inflatable boats, and they went all through the Tongass Islands, equally equipped inflatable, can't remember what they're called. They've got frames on them, and they had all their gear. And
they were rigid inflatable boats.
There you go, rigid inflatables.
Ribtech 655 boats, custom built in Southampton, each powered with a massive 130 horsepower 4-stroke engine, cost in excess of 40,000 pounds.
Yes. In fact, if I remember right, I think they set some records for like open ocean travel of boats that size. It was pretty amazing stuff.
So this is a boat that's made in England, you said?
Yes.
I don't know where it was made.
It says
you're going to be out on the ocean in something that's capable of not only leaking water in, but leaking air out of the structure.
Right.
Yep.
Made in England. I don't think I want that.
And then
I just don't.
And then it continues on here that Honda officially supplied all the vehicles for the challenge, including 20 CRVs, 40 TRX 450 all-terrain vehicles.
Yeah.
And then supplied the motors to the boats.
Yeah. I think what happened ultimately was there was a lot of, I think about that time, that was when Survivor was taken off and a lot of these reality shows. And so the Camel Trophy, if you think about that, the amount of resources, 20 different equally equipped vehicles, all the gear, I didn't spend a dime. All my gear was covered. All of that was completely covered. You think times 20 different two-person teams, it was expensive. And I think ultimately,
all the travel.
Yeah, the travel. I didn't mention that either, John, on the event. It was not 2-man teams, it was 2-person teams, and there were 5 women that competed. It was a great mix of people, and it was purely on skills based through all those assessments that you were selected.
And according to the Camel Trophy Club website, so that you're right,
Yes.
the 2000 was the last Camel Trophy event. And they said within a few years, international legislation made running events and producing products with the slightest traceable links to the tobacco industry illegal. And although for many years Camel Trophy events were sponsored by WBI, producers of Camel Trophy clothing and watches, their parent company, RJ Reynolds, was the tobacco manufacturer. And they go on to say the irony is that even if the Camel Trophy had continued into the 2000s, international law would have soon made it to run impossible to run.
Yes. Yeah. So it's the combination of those two.
Yes.
It ended. But
I also think that part of that was Land Rover made a point to start changing, I think, their marketing to include more adventuring and less on vehicle capability, as you had mentioned earlier.
Yes.
They were now
Correct.
seeing that people wanted to use the vehicle, go do something. And versus the vehicle was the thing.
Hence them supplying Freelanders instead of Discoveries.
Yes. They did have was a G4 Challenge for a while.
And they had the G4 was their own version of that, which was adventuring, which is also adventuring.
Correct. It's funny. I think about it now, but think about how big overlanding is today. And to me, Mongolia was the ultimate overland experience, right? You're out there, you're figuring it out, and the world's premier off-road vehicle for 4 people to ride in terms of getting around through just about anything. That was the ideal rig at the time, for sure.
Doug, thanks very much for coming on the podcast, talking about the Camel Trophy. We really appreciate it. I know you don't own a Land Rover. You will someday. You've been a Land Rover owner. You just haven't had the Land Rover yet.
Thank you, guys. It's an absolute honor. And frankly, I'm like really honored to especially find out that I was only one of 2 participants in the podcast that does not own a Land Rover. And so I hope I can break that trend. As I shared earlier, I'm actually going to go visit Portland Land Rover next week to share a presentation with them. And so don't give up hope. And so if I do get one, you'll have to have me come back, maybe.
Absolutely. You're not dead yet, so you have plenty of time. Let's get you in a Rover. And get on with your life.
And some of those Land Rover events, so the Anarch event, they had some really neat old iron there, just really cool stuff. And some was for sale, and that's a great opportunity. So I'm my eye out. Yep.
Everything's for sale.
It's just the amount. Yes.
But
exactly.
guys, if I could wave my magic wand, the vehicle would be that 1997 Disco that we drove across Mongolia. It was just a really cool experience, once in a lifetime. I'll never forget it. I've really enjoyed.
Do you know where that truck went?
I don't know where it went. I haven't really Googled that or looked very hard, but it was whoever got it. They got a great rig because it was in super good shape.
Maybe a listener knows where it happened and we can let you know.
Yes, help me out. Yes. I'd love to find it.
Let's reconnect you.
In fact, maybe Chris and I will have a competition who can buy it first. I don't know, but
perfect. I love it.
It won't be cheap, I'm pretty sure.
No.
Now they know you're looking for it.
Especially.
Hey, thanks again, Doug. Really appreciate taking the time. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Thank you very much, and embrace the unknown.
We hope you enjoyed show number 135 for June of 2024. Thanks to our guest this month, Doug Mays. Doug is a Camel Trophy participant, and he participated in Mongolia in 1997. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. It was great to hear from him and his experience and adventure. Even though doesn't drive a Land Rover, he's still Land Rover royal.
But he has towed one across a river with a kayak.
Who among us has done that? There's a handful of people ever who have done that. He's one of them. He's Land Rover royalty.
And an even smaller handful of people that would actually want to do that.
Played, sir. Well played. And thanks to Morgan and Harold. Appreciate it, gentlemen, for joining us again.
Thank you, as always.
And Harold, will see you at the North Star Rover Rally in early August.
Not if I see you first. I will be there for 1st of August through the 4th, I believe it is, in northern Minnesota, part of the Iron Range.
If you have not already registered and you're interested in going, do it now. Please do. Go out to an
now
club. And there's a
How
link
about now? I'll wait.
to register. There you go. And hopefully we'll have Dixon back next month to tell us about Placid Lassie's adventures. And also thanks to the One True Pax for his continued audio production support. We do appreciate it, Pax. We post a new podcast at the end of every month. Our website, CentreSteer.com, has all our shows. You can listen to them there. There's show notes, which have links to the stories we discussed in today's podcast, including the camo of the Defender Octa. You can see that in the Bantam Jeep Festival news article. You can directly support the podcast at patreon.com/CentreSteer, and you'll get access to bonus content as a result. You can also support the show through a t-shirt, a sticker, or you can even buy us a tea/brown water. Visit our website for details on all of those. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover.
On behalf of the entire North American crew of the CentreSteer podcast, I'd like to thank you for listening today. We know you have a choice when it comes to your podcasting material, so we do appreciate your choosing us. Please take a moment to look around you for any personal items you may be leaving behind, especially in the overhead bins. Please remember that some items may have shifted during the show. Please watch your step as you make your way past the drums of spare oil, and you may now resume your important things.
You've been a Land Rover owner, you just haven't had the Land Rover yet.